What if we, the humble human race, could talk to dolphins? What would they tell us?
You've already taught me how to speak dolphin. All they ever want to talk about is mackerel.
What could they teach us about their world, the ocean, a place we know less about than the surface of Mars? And if we somehow did develop a way to speak to those wet and wild water dwellers, a species about as foreign as it can get from us hairless Homo sapien bipedal baboons, could that be the first step in developing a way to speak to a species even more alien, namely aliens? Well, back in the terrifying, stinky decade that was the 1960s, that's exactly what NASA, along with a most likely mentally insane boomer by the name of John C. Lilly, were determined to find out by any means necessary. Even if those means involved literally giving these dolphins psychedelic drugs and, how do I put this? Giving them multiple human-to-dolphin happy endings several times a day. Yep, they actually did that. NASA actually funded a study giving LSD and freakishly frequent rub and tugs to dolphins in order to try and talk to aliens. So, sit back, put on some sweatpants, and pop a couple gel tabs, because it's time to talk about the wild story of the NASA-funded dolphin LSD experiments. So, guys, I recently found out that I was being charged every month for multiple different Amazon video add-ons that I purchased once several months ago to watch, like, one specific thing one time, then completely forgot about and have been paying for every month since. I think I just wanted to watch, like, Gumby and the Quiet on Set documentary, and now I've unsuspectingly paid like $80 collectively for that, and I don't know about you, but those two things are not worth $80 to me, alright? And keeping track of all of these subscription services and canceling them yourself can be pretty tricky. And today's sponsor, Rocket Money, is here to help. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. As I mentioned, I'm using Rocket Money to cancel my unwanted subscriptions, as Rocket Money safely and securely identifies recurring charges and cancels your unwanted subscriptions for you. You can even cancel those subscriptions directly from within the Rocket Money app with just a couple of taps. You know, no need to worry about any annoying calls to customer service or taking care of anything else yourself. Rocket Money has got you covered. And as cool as that is, saving you money by finding and canceling those pesky unwanted subscriptions for you is not all they have to offer. I'm actually also using Rocket Money to lower my bills. You heard that right. I find this service very cool in particular because by simply uploading a photo of your bill and tapping a few buttons, Rocket Money will actually negotiate your bill price for you, from internet service to cable and phone bills, and try their best to help you pay the best price possible. I mean, who doesn't like saving free money? I do personally. I assume you do as well. You like money? It's generally liked by people. Rocket Money also helps you set budgets and can analyze your spending habits to create a custom budget that works for your lifestyle. You can automatically monitor your spending by category and get notifications when you've exceeded your limits. And I don't know about you, but I personally don't have the best memory, okay? I have crazy ADHD, and there's no overstating how much a budget tool like this helps someone like me keep track of how much I spend, so I can actually save money, which with inflation going crazy in America right now is more important than ever. Rocket Money has helped save its customers up to $740 a year, with over $500 million in canceled subscriptions alone. So if you want to have more money in your pocket, save more and spend less by joining the over 5 million members using Rocket Money today. Go to rocketmoney.com/necessary information, or just click the link in the description to get started for free. You can also unlock even more cool features with premium. That's rocketmoney.com/necessary information to get started for free. Really, go down to that description and save some money. Man, who doesn't want more money? I personally do. I love money. Tell them I sent you, support this channel, and save that cash. Thanks so much to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video, and now let's get into it. Let's begin our story in 1963 on the Caribbean island of St. Thomas with one Margaret LoveIt. LoveIt was in her early 20s at the time, young, dumb, and full of commitment, and while living on St. Thomas, her brother-in-law mentioned to her that he had found a secret laboratory. A secret laboratory so secret that he, some random guy, knew exactly where it was and what was going on there. Don't ask me how he found that out. The Guardian article didn't go any further into it, okay? So it's not important.
You will cease your investigation immediately.
Margaret's brother then informed her that this secret lab on the east side of the island was experimenting with dolphins.
Much like we might do in front of a mirror when we do that new dance step, or when we just want to see.
So Margaret, presumably being bored, as people used to be sometimes before TikTok, decided to go pay the lab a visit. And this one innocuous trip to a mysterious Caribbean dolphin laboratory would come to irrevocably change the course of Margaret's life, the life of one very horny dolphin, and the reputation of a once revered neuroscientist, NASA, and even astrophysicist Carl Sagan forever. So when Margaret arrived at this super top secret dolphin lab that she was able to just find herself only off her brother mentioning that it was on the east side of the goddamn island, she was greeted by the lab's director, Gregory Bateson. Now, this was the first unannounced visitor that Greg had received at his definitely super uber secret undetectable dolphin lab, but he decided, f it, this chick's hot, I guess I'll show her my dolphins, who knows, maybe I'll get lucky and she'll touch my blowhole, right? So he takes her in and tells her to watch the lab's 3 dolphins and take down notes on what she saw. Margaret later recounted about this experience, quote, "There were 3 dolphins, Peter, Pamela, and Sissy. Sissy was the biggest. Pushy, loud, she sort of ran the show. Pamela was very shy and fearful, and Peter was a young guy. He was sexually coming of age and a bit naughty." Now, if you think that last bit is kind of a weird thing to say about a dolphin from a human woman, boy howdy, do you have some shit in store for you, bud. That is, let's just say that is some serious foreshadowing for some later events there. Margaret left the lab later that day full of spunk and whimsy at the thought of working with nature's naughty marine mammals, and despite her complete lack of scientific knowledge or training, the lab director Greg said she was free to come back whenever she wanted, presumably as she had not yet caressed his quaking blowhole as anticipated, and he wanted to secure another shot. Greg then returned inside the laboratory to connect with the developer of the Dolphin Lab and the second main character of our tantalizing tale here, John C. Lilly, neuroscientist, LSD enthusiast, best friend of known asshole Timothy Leary, the actual inventor of the isolation float tank, and guy who probably would have really enjoyed hanging out with Joe Rogan. Born in 1915 in the cold Midwestern wasteland that is Minnesota, John C. Lilly was brought into this world as the statistically worst genre of person, besides Limp Bizkit fans, a trust fund boomer. Yes, John's family was indeed incredibly wealthy, and said massive wealth allowed John to nurture his interest in the dark art of science.
Safety glasses off, motherfuckers.
Which he had developed at a very young age. By the time Lilly was just 13, he was actually already running his own chemical laboratory in his parents' basement, which coincidentally is exactly what I also call the meth lab in my parents' basement, as it is technically correct.
My name is Skylar White, yo. My husband is Walter White, yo.
Jokes aside, though, this 13-year-old boy was indeed running a legit chemical laboratory in his parents' basement and was being supplied with said chemicals by a, quote, pharmacist friend.
I'm shoving them up my butt. Of course I'm eating them.
So, like, I don't know what kind of pharmacist gives pharmaceutical grade chemicals to a 13-year-old boy to play with, but I have a sneaking suspicion that my meth lab comment might just have been a little more accurate than originally thought, especially with Lily's history with substances that would occur later in his life. But the kid actually was, by all accounts, an absolute genius, meth-fueled or otherwise, with him being so dang smart that his classmates referred to him as Epstein Jr. And wait, what? Oh, that says Einstein Jr. Oh, okay, yeah. No, that makes a lot more sense. Holy shit. Had myself going for a second there. I was like, isn't this kid 13? I'm pretty sure he should stay about as far away from Jeffrey as possible at that point. After successfully making it past the maximum age allowed on Epstein's Island unscathed, John then went to Caltech University in Pasadena, California, where he had initially been given a full scholarship before the school learned 1 year later that his father, a man whose very unfortunate name sounds like what would happen if you put a seed up your urethra and diligently watered it for several weeks, Dick Lilly, was rich as f***, stripped his funding, and kicked him out of school. That paragraph was written a little weird. The dude's dad's name is Dick Lilly. He's rich as f***. He got a scholarship at Caltech, and then they found out that Dick was rich and kicked him out of school. Okay, all right, back to the video. John's father, Dick, then paid up properly to Caltech, and John was then allowed to return, and thus began a long pattern of John making very questionable decisions and then burning through his family's massive wealth in order to support them.
Say, that reminds me, can I have some money?
John then got engaged his junior year to a human woman, and then pretty immediately completely left said human woman fiancé to go become a lumberjack for a while to avoid what he called nervous exhaustion brought about by his studies and upcoming marriage. Soon after venturing off to develop the ancient art of turning trees into chop down trees, John then pulled a real lumberjack no-no by dropping an axe on his foot like a fucking idiot, and his subsequent stay in the hospital then inspired him to become a medical doctor, presumably after he saw many doctors during his stay, and not once did they drop an axe on their fucking foot. So he thought it was a much better career field for him to pursue. After John informed his rich and well-connected daddy of his newfound desire, Dick then nepotistically arranged for John to meet George Horrence? Who the fuck? What kind of a middle name is that, George? His dad arranged for him to meet George Horrence Mayo, the founder of the world-famous medical mecca, the Mayo Clinic, which I personally thought was some kind of hospital for condiments as a child, and was always confused as to why all those bald kids were going there during my school's annual Leukemia Awareness Week.
Alexander's mom calls him the most perfect boy in the world.
She's right.
I love your confidence.
I really didn't pay a lot of attention to anything other than eating Play-Doh in school, okay? I really did not know a lick of what was going on. After taking the old mayonnaise man's advice to enroll at Dartmouth and finishing his medical training there, John decided to participate in an experiment designed to study the creation of glycosamine, I think, a major contributor to muscular function in the human body. This experiment involved temporarily turning Lilly into a steakless super vegan by putting him on a completely protein-free diet for several weeks, a diet which, much like regular vegans, completely ravaged his body and mind, pushing him to, quote, extreme physical and mental limits and causing him to grow increasingly weak and delirious up until they concluded the experiment and he was allowed to return to shoving whatever the 1960s equivalent of McChickens was into his face hole. Did they have McChickens back then, actually? When was the McChicken unleashed upon our world? 1980. Okay. Gonna have to wait a while for that one, John. They did have Taco Bell in the 60s, though, so he could have been boofing some Crunchwrap Supremes here. Although, actually, now that I think about it, he's like fresh out of college at this point in the story, so this was the 1940s.
What an evening I'm having. First a Negro puts his hands on me, and then this.
And I bring up this experiment in particular because throughout his career, Lilly developed a scientific code of ethics of sorts that no scientist should ever conduct an experiment or procedure on another person that they have not first conducted on themselves.
Shelley, you've been a guinea pig long enough. It's time to see if this stuff really works.
And this extreme Oprah-esque crash diet for science.
Look at my breast! Oh, I don't have breasts! I'm an A-cup! I don't even need a bra anymore! Look!
Is a bit of foreshadowing for how aggressively Lilly would put his own body and mind through the ringer later down the line. Yeah, the story is about more than just dolphins and LSD and some other fun stuff regarding the Dolphins. No, it's crazy. So kooky. Such a kooky story. Now, because this was the 1940s, Lilly wrapped up his college career by attending a class simply titled How to Build an Atomic Bomb. Which, sure. Okay, yeah, he can go to an entire college course for that. But when I go on the dark web and type that exact same phrase into the search bar, suddenly the FBI shows up at my house and shoots my wife and dog in the face. I f***ing hate boomers, dude. They got to do f***ing everything besides goon. And that's a pro in their camp. John and several other classmates then took their notes from this class and compiled them together into a book, which they also creatively titled How to Build an Atomic Bomb. So, yeah, that's... Where can I... Is there like a Barnes & Noble I can pick that up in? Or I've got some ideas for Florida. If somebody could just add that to my Amazon wish list, please and thank you. And now, with John fully out of college, we can finally get to the experience that first placed the brainworm that was Dolphin's superintelligence inside the mind of John C. Lilly in 1949. So, Lilly had been living in Massachusetts at this time. May the Lord have mercy on his soul.
We're gonna try the Boston method.
Yeah! You heard it!
And one morning, he was strolling along the beach, yelling about the Boston Red Sox and asking various passerby if they do or do not like them apples, when he stumbled upon a massive dying pilot whale that was washed up on the beach. After seeing this whale, John was really taken aback at the sheer size of the creature, in awe at the absolute magnitude of its
Magnum Dom,
as well as the massive size of the animal's brain. Graham Burnett, history of science professor at Princeton University, said about this, "You are talking about a time in science when everybody's thinking about a correlation between brain size and what the brain can do. And in this period, researchers were like, whoa, big brain. Huh. Cool." So Lilly, naturally, then after seeing the whale's very big brain, thought, wow, big brain? Huh. Cool. And thus began a lifelong fascination with the swimming mammals of our planet's oceans and the mysteries that lie inside their smooth, squeaky skulls. And what swimming mammal is the most intelligent of them all?
Dolphin!
Now, Lilly had all kinds of wild ideas on how dolphin intelligence could be utilized by the human race if we could just somehow find a way to communicate with the fishy fellows and unlock their sea-based secrets. John wrote about just one of these potential applications, saying, quote, "No human is as good at detecting, tracking, herding, and catching fish as dolphins are. If we could get their cooperation, the whole fishing industry might be revised." John even envisioned a future where if dolphins could be taught to speak English, they would be given a permanent cetacean seat at the United Nations.
It's approaching the podium.
Surely it cannot speak.
Snarky. Talk. Man.
I'm sorry, let me start over.
Which, admittedly, would be dope as to time travel to the future and just see a dolphin next to a cyborg Barack Obama at the UN, chatting him up about Michelle and mackerel. That would be tight. I'm in favor of the motion of the ocean. Interestingly enough, up until this point in history, around the early 50s, the general public, especially the beer and violence-loving group of Massachusettsites that Northeastern Americans affectionately refer to as massholes.
We bang Hueys wherever we want. No blinker. We cut you off on the pike, and then we slow it right the fuck down. And the second that light turns green, I'm honking. You know, our forefathers granted us this right to be loud, proud, occasionally obnoxious.
Actually saw dolphins as kind of huge pricks.
I'm gonna give your liver such a punching.
Much like any New York sports team. Really, I'm serious. Fishermen all along the east coast of the U.S. considered dolphins to be vermin, similar to a pigeon or a raccoon or James Charles.
I'm actually crying right now.
And they actually called them herring hogs because they were in direct competition with the dolphins for fish. This popular perception of dolphins as James Charles-esque pieces of absolute shit began to slowly change in the 1950s with a place called Marine Studios in Miami, Florida, the very first place in the world to keep bottlenose dolphins in captivity and show off their bubbly, rambunctious, intelligent, horny nature to the general public. Apparently, simply viewing these dolphins swim around doing tricks and squeaking for fish changed America's opinion of the cute little creatures from that of disgusting sea swine to intelligent, beautiful, innocent, in spite of sometimes raping people, creatures. Yeah, dolphins, they do that sometimes. They do that kind of a lot, actually. They at least try to get up in your holes. Dolphins are freaks, okay? You will learn that in this video.
Dolphins have been known to play with themselves by wrapping live wriggling eels around their dolphin doorknobs. Oh, you know it gets worse. Dolphins will also divorce a fish's head from its body and then use the disembodied fish head as a fish light. There's videos. I'm not gonna show you, but they're there.
And if you ever swim with them, just make sure to wear some bulletproof underwear or they will try and get up in there. After making a trip to Marine Studios to gaze upon the dolphins himself, Lilly was so moved by the animals that he decided to completely drop his work as a neuroscientist at the National Institute of Health to devote his time exclusively to pursuing his almost fetish-like fascination with himself. Well, okay, no, that part will come a little bit later. It was dolphins. At first. You'll see what I mean about his self-obsession a little bit later. Before this happened, back when John was still working at the National Institute of Health, his main job involved mapping the neural regions that trigger pain, fear, and arousal in monkeys, really trying to see what made them say ooh ooh and ah ah. John also explored the brains of rats, cats, sheep, and various other critters before focusing entirely on doing the dolphins. Well, okay, not doing the dolphins sexually, quite unlike one man named Malcolm Brenner, who apparently made a lot of hot, sweet love to many a porpoise in the 1970s, according to his own reporting. Wait, are dolphins even porpoises? Porpoise, I should really probably know that at this point. Oh, okay. No, they are not. Not the same thing. This guy Malcolm dolphins is what I'm saying, okay? Insert another blowhole joke here. I mean, Malcolm definitely inserted something in a blowhole. Okay, all right, I don't know who's still letting me write my own scripts over here. This is just not cool.
You can't keep getting away with it!
Lilly quickly developed his own novel method of placing the brain mapping devices into the cranium of the dolphins as the standard method for doing so with other animals, which was to put them under anesthesia and remove sections of the skull, didn't exactly work for dolphins in particular. This is because dolphins, much like Nico Avocado after his 5th fully loaded plate at the Golden Corral, have to consciously, effortfully focus on their own breathing in order to not f***ing suffocate and die face first in a plate of bacon-dusted mac and cheese. Yes, dolphins cannot breathe unconsciously like we non-morbidly obese humans can, even during sleep, and they have actually evolved a way around this by doing something called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, where they only shut down one half of their brain to sleep at a time, close one of their eyes that corresponds to that half of the brain, and then the other half just remains fully conscious to breathe and look out for danger and shit until it's time to switch hemispheres. It's pretty neat. I find it interesting. I wish I could do that, honestly. So because of this, dolphins absolutely cannot be put under anesthesia because it shuts down both hemispheres of the brain and they'll pretty immediately suffocate and die whether they're in air or water, which was a discovery that Lilly made himself multiple times, like way too many times. He just kept killing fucking dolphins this way, dude. It was kind of fucked up. Like, really, I mean, after you pump the first dolphin full of ketamine and it goes belly up after not breathing at all for 40 minutes, that's probably a sign to not f***ing do that exact thing again like 12 more times, dude. I mean, what, did you just think that first dolphin was a little slow or clinically depressed or something? Like at least after the second one, you should be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, no, dolphins just can't do anesthesia, I guess, but nope, must just be 12 stupid-ass dolphins in a row who all missed breathing class. Better make it an even baker's dozen just to make sure. After presumably deciding that the dead dolphin bills were piling up just a bit too high, Lilly pioneered a new, less invasive way to implant the mapping device into the dolphin brain, and this is where he became even more fascinated with the slippery, horny animal's intelligence, particularly when it came to their social communication. Lilly discovered that if a dolphin was trapped underwater and could not make its way up to the surface by itself to breathe, it could actually put out a specific distress call out into its general area, which would then get other dolphins to pile up under it and hoist it up to the surface to take a breath. He also discovered that, in many ways, dolphins are actually even better at communicating to each other than we humans are, finding that dolphins can actually carry on 2 separate conversations on each side of their head with clicks on one side and whistles on the other, similar to a human having one conversation in English and another in sign language simultaneously. It's pretty impressive. I assume that this capacity has something to do with their ability to separate the hemispheres of their brain into separate enough tasks that they can stay perfectly fine and alive with just one side of the brain while the other takes a little sleepy time cat nap for a while, but that's just my own personal theory. Dolphins have also been found to work in some pretty damn coordinated team efforts, occasionally working together to actually take down and sink entire whale hunting ships that were attacking them. This, in particular, reminds me of the ability of some bird species like crows, hawks, and ravens as well, I think, to hold a grudge against a specific person longer than even a human woman, which is, I didn't even know that was physically possible. It's truly an incredible thing. Crows appear to have the ability to communicate these grudges to other members of its murder. Badass name for a herd of crows, by the way, much better than a group of ravens, which are known as an unkindness for some goddamn reason. I assume Canadians may be responsible for that naming convention. Just seems like the kind of polite bullshit they do. Anyway, say a human, like, kicks a crow for trying to eat his tasty, delicious baby, denying the crow his natural, God-given right to nip at the infant's chewy little boba pearl-like eyeballs. That crow will actually get pissed at said bird kicker and will start stalking him for up to 2 whole years, swooping down and pecking at the guy, shitting on his car, and just generally fucking up his life whenever possible. But not even just this one crow will do this. See, that initial kicked crow will actually go home and tell his other crow buddies, hey, this fucking prick wouldn't let me eat his baby's eyeballs. And then, listen to this, he actually has the gall to go and kick me with his foot. Yeah, still can't fly right with this wing. It was fucked up. So can you guys actually also fuck with him as well for literally 2 years? That'd be great. And then the rest of the crows are just like, bet. And they all just gang stalk this dude every day for literal years just for being mean to one of them once. People have actually had to move cities because this bird-based torment got so bad, particularly in Seattle. And sometimes if they're in the same general region like the PNW, even the birds in that new city will still fucking mess with them. It's truly wild. Anyway, back to that crazy acid guy and the Dolphins. Man, this was supposed to be a short video that didn't take 80 billion hours to make. Evan, Jesus Christ, why do I always insist on doing this to myself? The main dolphin discovery made by Lily's team as it relates to this story was that dolphins, when in the care of humans for extended periods of time, appeared to attempt to replicate human speech by making noises above the water instead of within it, something that dolphins almost never do in the wild as they, live in the water and such. And there's typically no weird monkey people up above the water telling them to jump through hoops and shit to catch fish that they could squeak at, you know what I mean? It was apparently John's wife, Mary, who first put this realization together, and she later said about this discovery, quote, I came in at the top of the operating theater and heard John talking, and the dolphin would go, wuh, like John. And then Alice, his assistant, would reply in a high tone of voice, and the dolphin would imitate her voice. I went down to where they were operating and told them that this was going on, and they were quite startled.
I'm so startled.
And this perceived effort by the dolphins to seemingly attempt to communicate with humans gave Lily the brilliant idea that would initiate this long and f***ed up journey teaching dolphins to talk, which, okay, I mean, sure, yeah, that seems admittedly like a pretty cool f***ing idea in theory, right? But, plenty of other animals naturally try to replicate human speech as well. That's not really a new concept, man. I mean, not everyone is aware of this, but if you have one of nature's devilish, cuddly, conniving, callous assholes known as a cat in your home, they're actually doing this exact same thing to you every single day. That's right, cats actually do not talk to each other the same way that they scream at you for fancy feast every morning while sitting politely on your face to suffocate you into waking up and feeding their fat Garfield-like faces. Their meows directed at people are actually designed to replicate frequencies that they pick up from human conversations, and it's even been found that a cat's purr is an attempt by the little critter to replicate the cry of a human baby, naturally triggering our innate sense of nurturing and caring for our young. So basically, your cat is a master manipulator. All right, so don't let Mittens get away with gaslighting you any longer, okay? Rise above that shit. Plus, Lily, I don't, Don't know if you ever heard of these things called parrots before, but they exist and kind of replicate human speech pretty goddamn well. A lot better than dolphins.
What's this made of? What's this made of?
Glass.
What's this bowl made of? All right, what's this small cup made of? What's this made of?
Wrong! In fact, in the very well-titled book on Lily's experiments, Adult Swim, How John C. Lilly Got Groovy, author Graham Burnett wrote about this very point, quote, Dr. Lilly takes the view that those who speak are those capable of learning language. If 1, 2, 3, said with very poor intelligibility by a dolphin, is indicative of the giant-brained animal's ability to speak, and therefore to learn language, what is to be said of a parrot's clear-cut Polly wants a cracker? Furthermore, if the parrot is then given a cracker, have we just established communication with an alien species? It's a valid question. It's a valid question. I mean, science to date has found claims of any animal communicating with humans in any way that actually resembles human-to-human communication to be dubious at best. You know, even in probably the best supported case of such activities, being monkeys and apes, such as Coco the gorilla, who is a fraud. Spoiler. She's a fraud, which you'd know well if you've ever seen this deep dive into the topic by the channel Soup Emporium on YouTube. It's a good video, good channel. Don't leave this video for it, please, God. Lord in heaven, don't do that. But, you know, after you're done binging my entire channel, go check it out. Yeah, it's good stuff. Tell them I sent you. And those primates are the animals most closely genetically related to humans, you know? And if they can't even do it, I don't know why you'd expect an animal with no hands or a vocal box or mouth shape capable of producing consonants to have much better luck, you know? But to be fair, devil's advocate, all right, dolphins are thought to be much smarter than cats and birds and even other primates. So I do kind of see where John's LSD-ravaged mind was at here. And again, this was the 60s, so for the millionth time, everyone was lead poisoned as shit. Okay, to the point that talking to dolphins via psychedelic drugs just seemed like a solid, logical idea to pursue. That's my general theory as to basically everything that happened in the middle to late 20th century. Everyone just literally fucking had brain damage from lead in the air, so it adds up. So, at first, Lilly was not only trying to somehow teach dolphins how to speak a language that, again, they are physically incapable of producing the sounds for, but John also wanted to both learn and understand what he creatively dubbed Dolphinese, which, as the name suggests, is what he called the language that dolphins use to communicate between each other, mostly underwater. Almost entirely I think entirely underwater, I believe. They just do the above water shit to tell us to give them mackerel, you know. This underwater dolphinic language consists of various whistles, clicks, squeaks, nonverbal gestures, and body language, as well as something called burst pulses, which have been described as, quote, loud broadband pockets of sound. And as I think you could probably put together yourself from that description, most likely much faster than John C. Lilly himself did, even if John was somehow able to decode and translate this dolphin language, no human would ever be able to actually physically speak it themselves, as while we can kind of click and whistle, we can't do it in the frequency that dolphins actually use to communicate with each other.
If we speak in low-frequency voices, I don't think they can... Ow!
And we certainly cannot emit whatever the fuck burst pulses are, and super duper definitely can't do all of that while submerged in a body of water. So, and not just that, right? We can't only not speak Dolphinese, we also can't even really listen to it unassisted by some kind of technology, as most of the frequencies dolphins use to communicate with each other are not just too high for us to produce verbally, especially, again, underwater, but also too high for us to even hear with the human ear. So, yeah, humans learning and speaking dolphin was out of the question pretty much immediately. But at the same time...
You don't go to Japan and kidnap a Japanese man and start jerking him off and giving him fucking acid and then ask him to learn English!
The dolphins speaking our English language was also quite the long shot, to say the least, but honestly, did sort of seem closer to the realm of possibility than us somehow emitting burst pulses and whistling underwater. So they did decide to go in the Dolphin-speaking, fluent English direction. And John C. Lilly was actually not the only one conducting some very intensive dolphin communication-based research at that time. He was also joined in that endeavor by the homosexual wing of the American military, the U.S. Navy. You see, the Navy was also attempting to decipher Dolphinese in order to legit train and develop dolphins into a new literal dolphin-based Marine Corps of such, a Marine Corps made up of marine mammals, the Marine Marines, one might even say. And Lilly, obviously thinking that dolphins are cool, tight, and based as was not a huge fan of these naval operations, as he did not particularly wish to see his cetacean comrades turned into deadly dolphinic weapons of war for the U.S. military. But at the same time, they're, you know, the U.S. military, so not a lot you can do to stop them from doing literally anything they want to do. Like, I don't know, fund a genocide or something like that, so his protest kind of fell on deaf ears. Either way, though, the Navy obviously does not have weaponized super dolphins that we know of, at least, so clearly their operations didn't get very far in that domain either. Around this time, John C. Lilly wrote the first of what would end up being at least 5 books he penned on dolphin communication throughout his career, which he titled Man and Dolphin. And this 312-page book, which John told his colleagues that he had written in a single weekend while incredibly high on amphetamines, much like the script for this video, appeared to strike a chord with 2 special astrophysicists named Frank Drake and Carl Sagan. And this is precisely where NASA comes into the picture.
NASA's like, fuck, man, let's do this shit.
Still can't believe this story sometimes after all this research. It's real, though. NASA really went and did this shit. These guys right here, these guys. You guys like my outfits? Is this worth it? Is this worth anything here? I can write it off on my taxes, which I enjoy, but, you know, do you like it? Let me know in the comments. So Carl Sagan, probably the most famous spaceman smart guy behind possibly Neil deGrasse Tyson and the cyborg who's now confirmed to have ridden on Epstein's private jet called the Lolita Express to his child sex island Stephen Hawking. Carl gets a hold of John's book, Man and Dolphin, and is just absolutely blown away.
Wow. If dolphins can fucking talk? What the fuck, man? This book is blowing my mind.
And that other super smart space guy, Frank Drake, the creator of the Drake equation, which is an equation which determines the likelihood of an area of space containing alien life, also read Man and Dolphin and was similarly flabbergasted at the possible ramifications of communicating with the humble dolphin. Drake said about John's book, quote, "I'd read his book and was very impressed. It was a very exciting book because it had these new ideas about creatures as intelligent and sophisticated as us, and yet living in a far different milieu. We both wanted to understand as much as we could about the challenges of communicating with other intelligent species." Now, if you've ever seen the movie Arrival, which I technically have, although I was much too red wine drunk to remember the second half, so no spoilers in the comments, you little scamps, okay? You'd know how hard it just might be to communicate with an alien species. They might not have mouths at all, or communicate telepathically, or through a series of different smelling chemical gases. You know, we have no fucking clue. That shit sounds hard, you know? I mean, if it was like an olfactory thing, you know, we could just fart at the conference table with them and they're suddenly like, holy shit, they just declared war with our assholes. So Carl and Frank saw Lilly's experiments as a possible trial run, I guess, here at home to find a way to communicate with a species almost as alien as aliens might be, the humble dolphin, and that the methods developed in order to learn how to communicate with the dolphins might help in our quest to communicate with actual, legit alien life whenever that task might later present itself to the human race. So Carl Sagan then invites Lilly to come to a NASA meeting that was held by Frank Drake, where they all apparently hit it off so damn well that they decided to make friendship bracelets of sorts for each other in the form of commemorative pins featuring a dolphin, and even referred to their cute little trio as the, quote, Order of the Dolphins, which all sounds just a little fruity. Nothing wrong with that, but just a little bit gay. See, it seems like the dolphins weren't the only characters in this story doing some sounding, if you know what I mean. This meeting eventually led to NASA giving John C. Lilly a shit ton of money with which to fund these dolphin experiments, which in 1963, John then used to open that super special secret dolphin lab that our old friend Margaret LoveIt discovered at the beginning of this video on the Caribbean island of St. Thomas. John named this dolphin-based laboratory CRI, or the Communications Research Institute, and Lilly designed this lab to be a comfortable habitat for both humans and dolphins, envisioning it to be a prototype for what he called dolphin lounges that would eventually be set up on coastlines all around the world as a place where both dolphins and humans could come and go freely to engage in some cross-species communication. Lilly said about this, quote, "To talk and make sense with the dolphins, we must meet them at least halfway in their own element. In the seawater, we will communicate. We must learn to live wetly." That's a funny thing to say. And someone who definitely learned to live wetly, to put it very lightly, was our good friend Margaret LoveIt. You see, after she returned to the lab after that first visit, she was told about the true nature of the studies going down there, and the whole talking dolphin business was apparently a concept that really resonated with the young, idealistic boomer. Margaret later recounted about this, quote, "There was this book that my mother gave me called Miss Kelly. It was a story about a cat who could talk and understand humans, and it just stuck with me that maybe there is this possibility." Now, of course, I too thought after my first impassioned viewing of Stuart Little that it would in fact be cool if mice wore little sweaters and got up to wacky animal-based hijinks. And if I was on a Caribbean island in the early 60s and someone told me that they were pretty darn sure that they could get dolphins to speak f***ing people language, yeah, I think I might want a piece of that action too. But Margaret, she wanted a really big piece, a big hunkin' chunk of this action. And soon, this completely untrained non-scientist with no experience with any of this shit to speak of would become the most involved person by far in John's epic quest to communicate with the humble dolphin. Margaret quickly started spending as much time with the dolphins as she could and began crafting her own daily lessons to try and teach them to cut out all their dolphinese chatter bullshit and exclusively produce human-like noises.
Today is August 18. This is the morning lesson with Peter. Hello.
And when I say as much time as possible, I mean that. After working intensively at the so-called Dolphin House for several weeks, Margaret developed a bit of a problem with one aspect of the lab's operations. She said about this, quote, "Every night we would all get in our cars and pull the garage door down and drive away. And I thought, well, there's this big brain floating around all night. It amazed me that everyone kept leaving, and I just thought it was wrong." So, naturally, Margaret made the same decision here, and decided she was going to intentionally flood the entire house and straight up live in there with the dolphins, very wetly, I might add, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. She told John that she thought the experiment would have better success if, instead of 3 dolphins, Margaret would live continuously around the clock with just one male dolphin, Peter, as he was apparently the most promising subject in the experiment so far. I personally think she may have had other reasons for choosing Peter that we'll get into later, but it's up in the air. And Peter wasn't, by the best results so far, he wasn't, like, speaking English. He was not intelligible at all by any means, but apparently he just, made the most noise in response to their vocal lessons.
I am going to teach you English. He's like, she'd be like, "My name is Margaret." And he'd be like, and like,
that doesn't sound like her name.
No, and it was a fucking dolphin, give him a break!
Margaret decided that this method would be more natural and effective, pitching the new setup to John as being akin to a mother teaching her child to speak, and telling Lilly, quote, "I want to plaster everything and fill this place with water. I want to live here." And John C. Lilly, being, as previously established, a f***ing crazy person, absolutely loved this idea. and quickly gave her approval and resources to begin the necessary transformations to the house. Margaret soon took on the daunting task of waterproofing all the indoor rooms of the house and flooding them, as well as an outdoor balcony with several feet of water. She constructed her bed in the middle of the flooded room, surrounding it with shower curtains in a mostly futile attempt to keep it dry, and suspending her work desk over the water from the ceiling with rope. She had like a little hanging, swinging desk. It looked kind of fun, actually. I might just have to do that myself. F*** a standing desk. I want to swing. I want to kick my little feet. By the summer of 1965, the house was finally fully flooded and ready for Margaret to move in full-time and start her one-on-one lessons with Peter 6 days a week, with the 7th day used for Peter to re-socialize with the other 2 female dolphins kept in a separate part of the lab. Margaret had shaved her head to prepare for living in seawater basically non-stop for the next 6 months, and by the very first night of these conditions, sleeping in her floating bed surrounded by shower curtains, Margaret, for a brief, fleeting moment, pondered the ridiculousness of what she had spent the last year of her life pursuing, stating, quote, "Human people were out there having dinner or whatever, and here I am. There's moonlight reflecting on the water, this fin and this bright eye looking at you, and I thought, wow, why am I here?" But then you get back into it, and it never occurred to me not to do it. What I was doing there was trying to find out what Peter was doing there and what we could do together. That was the whole point, and nobody had done that. And Margaret would very soon find out that living wetly was kind of wet as f***, like really, really wet. Who'd have figured? She said about this aspect of the experiment, quote, "I slept usually in daytime clothes, wet, in a bed that was wet, with a dry quilt that got wet, with a dry pillow that got wet, except for a corner that I protected with my cheek." And keep in mind that all of this wetness here was not just being caused by regular old fresh water. Okay, this was seawater, legit seawater that was pumped in from the actual Caribbean Ocean from one side of the house located on the coast of the island's beach and pumped back out the other side of the house, constantly refreshing the area with new seawater. Now, I don't know about you personally, but I've swam in the Caribbean Oceans several times myself, and even after like a couple of hours of that shit, I'm pretty goddamn uncomfortable. I mean, it's salty, it stings your eyes, it'll give you a rash if it's on you for too long, and this woman was just completely covered in it 25/8. She's dressed in it, she's dripped out, literally, she's just dripping wet. She's sleeping in it. This bitch is salty, okay? But so was Peter the dolphin, right? And if she expected him to do what the humans do and speak perfect fluent English, it's only logical that she should do what the dolphins do and be completely covered in seawater 24/7 at all times, right? It's just a logical conclusion. Now, soon after she moved in with her new dolphin roommate, Peter started taking quite the interest in Margaret's body, which, I mean, you know, does make sense. If I was a big old swimming thing with no hands or legs, living around the clock with a weird little hairless monkey thing, I would probably try and figure out what the f*** is up with that too myself. Margaret said about this, quote, "Peter was very, very interested in my anatomy. If I was sitting here and my legs were in the water, he would come up and look at the back of my knee for a long time. He wanted to know how that thing worked, and I was so charmed by it." But this interest in Margaret's body would soon grow into something a little more than just innocent, curious, analytical interest for horny old Peter. Apparently, around this time, Peter began to enter dolphin puberty, and just like any greasy-haired teenage boy going through puberty and popping random boners in math class, Peter's new urges began to seriously distract him from their daily lessons. Margaret said about this new behavior from her dolphin roommate, quote, "Peter liked to be with me. He would rub himself, in a sexual manner, on my knee or my foot or my hand. I find that his desires are hindering our relationship. I can play with him for just so long now, and he gets an erection, and the lesson is broken." At first, to deal with Peter's newfound Austin Powers level of randiness—
Do I make you Randy? Yeah.
Which, by the way, who is Randy? And why was he so goddamn horny all the time? I mean, they named a whole word for it after him. What the f***? Randall, what were you up to? I've always found that naming convention kind of weird. I mean, it's just like his friends that love to steal, Rob, Nick, and Burgle. Anyway, at first, Margaret and some other members of the team caring for the 2 other female dolphins, Pam and Sissy, would hoist Peter out of the water when he became too horny to properly concentrate and move him into the other tank with the 2 female dolphins so he could have some freaky dolphin threesomes, and then take the now sexually content Peter back to his main learning area with Margaret. But apparently, this whole frequently moving Peter for his constant dolphin orgies business was just becoming just way too much work.
I didn't know I was gonna become a fucking Uber for dolphin fucking.
So Margaret then began to think of some other ways to deal with Peter's sexual desires that were a bit more convenient, let's say. She wrote about this at the time, quote, "Another thought I had on the subject is whether or not it would be best for the human to somehow find a way to satisfy the dolphin's sexual needs without another dolphin. This may strengthen the bond between the dolphin and the human."
I'll jerk him off, what's the big deal?
And indeed, Margaret soon began to deal with Peter's urges all on her own, using both her hands and feet, apparently, 2 things that other dolphins, not sure if you know this or not, don't have. So I'm sure that must have been a pretty interesting experience for old Peter there. Margaret wrote about her exact technique for this in this quote here. "I found that by taking his penis in my own hand, and letting him jam himself against me, he would reach some sort of orgasm." Oh my God, she's going into detail. "He would reach some sort of orgasm, mouth open, eyes closed, body shaking, and then his penis would relax and withdraw. He would then repeat this maybe 2 or 3 times, and then his erection would stop, and he seemed satisfied. Now it has happened that Peter has modified his sexual rambunctiousness to a more humanized level, and no longer has to come to a dead stop when he gets excited. Well, I mean, sure, he doesn't have to come to a dead stop, but it still appears to have come somewhere. Okay, let's get back to the quote. "Peter's sexual excitement usually begins with the biting business and me stroking him. Now, however, when his penis becomes erect, he no longer tries to run me down and knock me off my feet. Rather, he slides very smoothly along my legs, and I can very easily rub his penis with my hand or my foot. Peter accepts either, and again seems to reach some sort of orgasm and relaxes. We usually go through this 3 times more or so before he quits and starts another game."
Nice.
Which, wow, 3 or 4 different separate dolphin hand/foot job sessions back to back. That sure is one horny fucking dolphin right there. Okay, I get it. I get it now. Jeez Louise. And plus, I really don't, in retrospect, this really makes her description of this experiment as, quote, "a mother teaching her child to speak," pretty upsetting in this context here. And Margaret, surprisingly, or maybe unsurprisingly, considering that she's probably a fucking freak, didn't really seem to mind her new obligations here.
It was very precious, it was very gentle.
Saying, quote, "I wasn't uncomfortable with it, as long as it wasn't rough. It would just become part of what was going on, like an itch. Just get rid of it, scratch it, and move on. And that's how it seemed to work out. It wasn't private. People could observe it. Peter was right there, and he knew that I was right there. It wasn't sexual on my part. Sensuous, perhaps.
Sensuous, perhaps.
It seemed to me that it made the bond closer. Not because of the sexual activity, but because of the lack of having to keep breaking. And that's really all it was. I was there to get to know Peter, and that was part of Peter." Also, can we briefly appreciate the significance of this dolphin getting jerked off being called Peter here? That's a little on the nose here. Why don't we just call the dolphin Pecker or Schlong Dong, you know? And while this is all going on, you might be asking, where in the hell is John C. Lilly in all this? Well, the answer to that was, almost always, floating in the isolated sensory deprivation tank that he'd had set up in the highest room above the house, trying to, in his own words, aid the experiment by telepathically communicating with the dolphins.
They programmed the trips, as I found out later, and took me out into the universe in a very expanded way.
They?
The dolphins.
Really?
The 3 dolphins, yes.
Yeah, Man, the 60s sure were the 60s sometimes, weren't they? Now, like I mentioned earlier, John C. Lilly actually personally invented the sensory deprivation float tank in the late 1950s and was heavily engaged in the scientific study of brain mapping on animals, as well as humans. And since this is a necessary information video, naturally, the CIA has to come in at some point here. Now, if you've seen any of my many CIA videos or are familiar in any way with MKUltra, you'd know that around this time, the CIA was secretly trying anything and everything to attempt to crack the problem of human mind control. Really. It's true. The CIA legit wanted to actually develop the ability to control people's minds. And according to John C. Lilly, they were heavily invested in his research on mapping the human mind, as well as all the isolation tank stuff he was doing on himself, to see if there were any potential military or intelligence applications there, and if throwing some commies in a giant float tank might just make them so based and enlightened that they'd just tell the boys in black their country's entire trove of confidential Borscht-based information. Another theory of mine personally was that they might have also been interested in the brain mapping, and particularly the sensory deprivation stuff, to aid in their quest to develop legit psychic spies that they were working on with the CIA's Stargate project, which you can find out all about in this video, one of the like 20,000 I have on the CIA at this point. So go check it out and get informed. After this video, please God, I love my viewer retention. It's important to me. Well, in response to this pressure from U.S. intelligence agencies to focus on this particular aspect of his research, as well as his own interest shifting from the dolphin shit to his own, in my opinion, narcissistic fascination with himself and the inner space inside his own mind, John started spending increasingly more and more time alone floating in his tank, and less time, effort, or interest in anything Margaret or any of the others were doing with the dolphins, like, say, jerking them off constantly. He just wasn't interested in all that business. And this shift only intensified when John, naturally being an American weirdo in the 1960s, discovered our old friend LSD, something that the CIA had already been using heavily on veterans, regular schmegular people, and even their own agents for years at that point. That is correct. Before this discovery, John had just been floating face down in that tank, sober as a gopher, and was still talking about telepathically communicating with dolphins, as well as some other really crazy shit that he called ECHO, ECCO, which stood for the Earth Coincidence Control Office, which he described as basically being like an intergalactic group of spirits controlling the coincidences of his own life that would communicate and give orders to him while he was floating in his isolation tank. It was all just so very 60s.
ECCO in Italian means this is it, but it means to me the Earth Coincidence Control Office, which is one of God's field offices. And ECHO runs our lives, though we won't admit it.
And I immediately found that this was a doorway. This was not an isolation tank. That's a cover story. It is really a doorway into the universe. It allows one to escape one's body. One's soul can leave, and one can clean one's karma from one's soul and become pure spirit.
But now that John had found our good buddy Acid, he was about to kick things up a notch or six. John had first been exposed to the drug at a house party by the wife of Ivan Tors, the producer of the Dolphin movie Flipper.
They call him Flipper, Flipper, faster than lightning.
Who had apparently also invested a bunch of money into Lilly's dolphin experiments, most likely because an actual talking dolphin would probably make a pretty goddamn good movie. not gonna lie. The esteemed actor of Big Lebowski fame, Jeff Bridges, actually met John through his father around this time and said of his psychedelic interests, quote, "John Lilly was above all an explorer of the brain and the mind, and all those drugs that expand our consciousness." There weren't too many people with his expertise and his scientific background doing that kind of work. So John takes this acid at the party and is pretty immediately like, bro, I gotta take this in the tank, bro. Shit's gonna open my third eye so hard I'm gonna be seeing double. This is gonna be lit. So he goes to his government contacts and requested to join a small group of scientists that were cleared to perform LSD research at the time. And presumably the CIA, already having their own massive supply for stuff like MKUltra and their own personal amusement, granted John's request and started supplying him with tons of acid that he gladly and enthusiastically began using on himself constantly. And not just on himself either. No, John soon attempted to merge his two operations, that being LSD and communicating with dolphins, by taking LSD and attempting to communicate with dolphins.
This would be great. We could talk to the dolphins. Let's talk to dolphins!
John began this process by taking one of the lab's dolphins that had previously been attacked with a spear gun and was thus very hesitant and distrusting about humans, and injecting it and himself with LSD. And this dolphin apparently actually responded quite well to this, acting uncharacteristically relaxed around John and even swimming up to him playfully in the tank. During this session, John felt the most telepathically connected to a dolphin that he'd ever been, and began shifting his focus from talking to dolphins with his mouth to talking to them with his mind. Yeah, he was really kind of going off the deep end at this point. No pun intended. When John eventually approached Margaret and regaled her of this wild new mind-opening substance that was letting him telepathically communicate with the dolphins, and told her that he was going to use it on Peter as well to see if it would improve his ability to learn English, she, much like the Native Americans, had a few reservations and told John, quote, "Look, John, I am devoting my time, my energy, and my life working with Peter. I want no interference with my aims for that work. If you want to do your experiments on solitude and LSD, please keep them in the isolation room."
Margaret is like, "Hey, John, do you mind not injecting Peter with acid? That'd be awesome."
Yeah, Margaret really did not want Lily doing silly things like dosing the dolphins with psychedelic drugs. Okay, she would have much preferred to stick to much more humane and logical tactics, like constantly jerking them off, for example. So Lily heard all of this protest from Margaret and politely responded with something along the lines of, "Fuck off, bitch, this is my experiment, and if I want to trip with some dolphins, I'm gonna trip with some fucking dolphins, okay? Goddamn, you get to jerk them off all day, let daddy have some fun too, alright? Jesus Christ." He then, much to Margaret's chagrin, administered 200 micrograms of LSD to Peter and himself, which, for context, is roughly 4 tabs of today's standard acid. This LSD, however, contrary to Lily's theory that it would somehow magically make Peter jump up on his hind fins, throw on a monocle, and start speaking fluently in the Queen's English, actually appeared to make the dolphin shy, quiet, and more introverted.
My prediction was very poor.
So, yeah, teaching dolphins to speak using LSD, much like Peter would do with Margaret's assistance several times a day, was a complete bust, and soon the team would have something much more troubling on their hands than a puddle of Peter the Dolphins. Well, you see where I'm going with that, okay. You see, somehow, some way, the very popular adult magazine at the time, Hustler, which, as we all know, everyone reads for the articles, somehow caught wind of this entire debacle and published a scandalous article in between 2 pairs of fine areolas in one of their issues, entitled the article, "Interspecies Sex, Humans and Dolphins." So yeah, they were just jumping right into the action with the title there. That really kind of says it all. News of this scandalous Hustler article, which went into some very explicit detail as to what exactly she was doing with Peter's Peter, eventually made its way back to Margaret. And after reading the article, Margaret initially freaked the out and ran around the island purchasing every copy that she could find in an attempt to, I guess, buy literally all the copies in existence before realizing that that is, impossible, and that all she had done was give Hustler a shit ton more money with which to print a shit ton more copies of said magazine. But then again, this is the woman who tried to polish the old Dolphin rod so dang clean that the thing would jump up and start talking to her, so maybe impossible is just not in her vocabulary. And somebody else who caught news of this article was fucking NASA, who were a bit put off hearing about some of the activities going down in this experiment that they themselves were funding, to say the very least.
Someone at NASA opens it up and they're like, what the fuck? I paid $1 million to that asshole and they're out there fucking the dolphins?
I can only imagine the shock on that horny astronaut's face when he drops his drawers, opens up his favorite nudie mag, and finds out he's funding a giant psychedelic dolphin fuck fest. That's got to be a boner killer right there for sure. Well, I guess let's not kid ourselves. He probably still finished, but I imagine he was more ashamed than usual afterward. You see, Lilly had not exactly been entirely forthcoming to this government space agency about the exact details of his operation, namely, the dosing the dolphins with LSD and jerking them off part. And NASA was just a bit peeved that he'd left out these somewhat crucial details here. So Carl Sagan himself then personally went down to the Caribbean Dolphin Lab to verbally rip in to John C. Lilly's metaphorical asshole. I mean, this guy, this smart ass space guy.
I'm a very respected scientist. I love space. You know that.
He was f***ing pissed, okay, for John kind of making him look like a dumbass who vouched for an experiment that involved shooting dolphins full of LSD and freakishly frequent flipperless handies. That, does not exactly reflect well on one's professional career,
The next time I go to fucking NASA, they're gonna be like, oh yeah, sure, Carl. Who are you gonna jerk off in this experiment? Aliens? An owl? A partridge? What's it gonna be, Carl?
Soon after this, NASA promptly pulled their funding for all of John's experiments, and this forced him to shut down his Caribbean Dolphin Lab for good. The animals were initially sent to a far less spacious tank in Miami, where Peter then soon, presumably seeing no reason to live without the hairless monkey handjobs that he had become so accustomed to, actually committed dolphin self-die by taking one last breath, sinking to the bottom of his tank, and never coming back up to take another one. That's right, Peter had intentionally succumbed to the very same fate that all those dolphins did under John's care years ago when he just kept f***ing putting them under anesthesia. It's pretty sad. It's kind of sad. The dolphin, depressed dolphin, legitimate emo dolphin that guy was. It's R.I.P. Peter. John then released the other two dolphins into the wild, now with a pretty crazy ass story to tell all their friends in their native dolphinese, which, if it's true, the dolphins actually do have a complex language and oral traditions and shit. That really makes me wonder if there's now dolphin folklore about 3 of their fellow dolphins being captured by the hairless primate surface dwellers and being given acid and handjobs all day. Holy shit, that'd be f***ing insane. I feel like we need to actually communicate with dolphins now just to figure out if that happened. Please. John also appeared at this time to not only lose support from NASA, but also from whatever CIA agent was supplying him with mass quantities of LSD, as he soon completely ran out of said substance and turned to a new drug of choice to conduct experiments on his own mind with, ketamine, which he called vitamin K.
I took 150 milligrams of ketamine, and suddenly the Earth Coincidence Control Office removed my penis and handed it to me. And I screamed in terror. My wife Tony came running in from the bedroom, and she said it's still attached.
Which, I'm sure that description definitely allowed him to cognitively distance himself from the fact that he was injecting it into his thigh 24 times a day, literally 24 times a day, and once almost drowned in a hot tub while high on the substance. The guy's just taking his vitamins right there, right? Leave him alone. He's just trying to be healthy here, guys. Now, ketamine, while being psychedelic in its own ways, is just not the same thing as LSD, okay, for many reasons. I'll drug nerd out a little bit here for necessary context. First of all, psychedelics are just one type of a broader class of drugs known as hallucinogens, with the traditional hippy-dippy drugs like LSD, magic mushrooms, and DMT being referred to as psychedelics, and substances like ketamine and DXM being known as dissociatives. Still hallucinogens, but not really the same thing. Completely other class of drug. There is also a third, much more devious class of hallucinogens out there known as deliriants. They are the real naughty scamps of the psychonaut world that should really just not be taken by anyone, which includes substances like Benadryl and Datura. That's correct, kids. You can indeed get high off of Benadryl, but don't. For the love of God, don't. Unless you want to see spiders crawling all along your body and a creepy guy called the Hat Man peeking around the corner at you while you're completely immobilized on your mom's couch, okay? It is a bad time. Take it from me personally, it is a bad time. Also, in the rare event that you do want to do that does sound pleasurable to you, still don't fucking do it. That wasn't an actual unless you want to comment. Just don't fucking do it, okay? Deliriants have a scary name for a reason, all right? They are not fun. They make you delirious, okay? It's in the name. Anyway, LSD, like many other traditional psychedelics, is naturally non-addictive, as it builds a strong tolerance to its effects basically immediately, and you can't just take it 24 hours a day for the foreseeable future. Ketamine, on the other hand, you can just keep chugging that train down the K-hole pretty much until your bladder ceases to exist. That is also a real thing that happens when you abuse ketamine, kids. So don't do what this guy did if you value being able to not piss yourself constantly. So John then naturally developed what most sane people would call a problem with the substance.
Are you risking your life for that sort of thing?
I don't think in terms of risk. Evolution. Pushing. Getting there. Fast.
Is it possible that this might damage your mind permanently?
Who's to say?
But despite many people in his life telling him so, John held a bit of a different view on his experiments here, saying, quote, "One takes it so frequently that outside observers can say you're addicted, but that's a very bad definition of addiction. Any good research is obsessive and compulsive." Hey, Johnny boy, you know what else is obsessive and compulsive? F***ing drug addiction, buddy, okay? Trust me and every other high school Nick fiend out there, all right? Get off the sauce. John then proceeded to write a number of just insane, rambling books high off his ass on ketamine.
I talk about insanity, which is what's going on in your mind, and outsanity, which is where you communicate with those outside. As you know, if you give too much of your insanity, they'll lock you up. Well, I tried. Gave as much as I could. They didn't lock me up. They published it, paid me.
And eventually became quite the figurehead of the post-1960s psychedelic movement, on the levels of his close personal friends Timothy Leary and Ram Dass, before deciding to actually go back to trying to talk to dolphins again. That's right, even in the middle of a crippling ketamine addiction, this guy just really needed a round two. And it appears that the ketamine may have somehow made him a little less insane, actually, at least in certain aspects, because this time, at least in theory, John actually seemed to have come up with a much better method than in his previous attempts at dolphin communication. You see, the whole time that I was researching this experiment, I just kept thinking to myself, okay, so humans can't speak or hear dolphin, and dolphins clearly can't anatomically speak English, right? That was honestly made very clear long before you guys started giving them acid and jerking them off. So why not just use, I don't know, a fucking computer, right? Why not just create a program that can pick up the dolphinese frequencies, translate them to English writing of some kind, and then take English input in response and emit the frequencies needed to communicate that English input back to the dolphins, instead of, you know, literally doing the equivalent of trying to get these creatures to speak English out of their assholes. right? Well, at this point, John C. Lilly finally appeared to come to the same conclusion. John started what he referred to as the second epoch of dolphin-human communication and attempted to use computers to do, well, basically what I just described, and he called the new lab for these updated experiments what I imagine Jennifer Lopez would be called if her last name referred to the human rectum, Janus, like J-Lo, but an anus. All right. And despite having way less funding this time, on account of no one really wanting to give a bunch of money to the dude who ran an experiment giving acid and handy J's to dolphins for an experiment that he was once again doing to talk to fucking dolphins, this really might have been a much more promising endeavor than last time if Lilly was able to actually stick to his computer-based plans here and not start fucking tripping in an isolation tank trying to telepathically communicate with dolphins again. But Lilly was still the same old weird crazy boomer he's always been, and he unfortunately found himself unable to not start fucking tripping in an isolation tank trying to telepathically communicate with dolphins again. Who could have possibly seen this coming? This portion of his experiment eventually got out to the general public and once again scared away the few investors that he had managed to scrounge up out of fear that this was just going to end up being a complete repeat of last time, and John soon ran out of the required funding to carry on his dolphin communication experiments, and now, for the final time, he once again released his dolphins into the Atlantic Ocean. As for Margaret LoveIt, she eventually moved on from her fishy lover's death and married one of the main photographers from the original Dolphin House experiment.
Ah! You fuck
Dolphins.
Oh my God! Fucking white people.
And then actually converted that same Caribbean dolphin house back into a standard regular people house again and moved back into it with her new husband, eventually having 4 children together in that very same house. She really turned that dolphin house into a dolphin home, which actually kind of weird, in my opinion, to move your new family into the same place that you hand and foot fucked a dolphin for 6 months straight, but I guess the heart wants what the heart wants. A couple of other members of the Lilly Dolphin experiment team eventually came out to share their own experience, some coming out a bit more than others. Let's take one of Lilly's computer engineers, Ted Nelson, for example, who was kind of a f***ing sick freak, as you should clearly see from this clip here.
I worked for Lilly for a year, mid-1962 to mid-1963, and I knew him pretty well. He was fairly ruthless and a great con man, but good company. She liked me, and as she swam by, she would often present her genitals, which I would caress and sometimes finger. She liked that. I contemplated coming in on a Saturday at a time no one would be around and actually attempting intercourse. I was young and horny and, I believe, capable. But the idea that I might be found dead, naked, and raked by dolphin teeth deterred me.
And guys, really, I don't know what the f*** was going on with this house, that everyone of both genders was just trying to get it on with these f***ing dolphins all day long. And I don't think I want to know, actually. Seriously, please God, I don't. But I do think that you'll be happy to hear that today there are still several much more sane scientists undertaking the brave goal of communicating with the ocean's cute little dolphin dudes with hopefully much less concerning methods. Some of these brave dolphin enthusiasts include Jack Kazowitz of SpeakDolphin.com, who is working on building a kind of Dolphinese to English dictionary of sorts by analyzing the spectral shape of the dolphin sound waves, as well as Dr. Denise Herzing of the Wild Dolphin Project, whom I find has the most promising methods of any of these experiments. Certainly a lot more promising than just jerking them off. Definitely a little more thought was put into this one. Herzing is developing what it appears that John C. Lilly's second attempt with Janus might have if he had stopped tripping in a float tank for 5 goddamn minutes. A legit underwater dolphin to English translating device, which she calls a chat box, which will emit a dolphin noise that the team has approximated to mean a certain word or phrase in their dolphinic language, then listens to the noises that the dolphins make back in response and reads back what they have programmed that noise to mean into Herzing's ear through an attached headphone. And I truly wish the both of them the best luck possible with their endeavors here. I mean, I want to talk to dolphins just as much as the next guy, okay? I truly do think that the original idealistic goal of this experiment was a noble one. to uncover the secrets of the deep from some of the most intelligent creatures on Earth and get one step closer to eventually understanding beings from beyond our world. The whole thing just got mixed up and tainted, and like so many brave, idealistic endeavors before it, ended up drowning face first in a float tank full of LSD and dolphin fucking. May it rest in peace. All right, folks, that one was quite a doozy. Jesus Christ. As always, tell me in the comments what you're doing right now. I'm always curious how people use my videos. You know, are you at work? Is it 3 a.m. and I've successfully caused you to only get 3 hours of sleep before class tomorrow? Are you drawing not safe for work furry art in your mom's basement? I f***ing want to know, people. Okay, I don't judge. Send me some copies. Who knows? Really, send me some copies, dude. Seriously, send them to me. I'm gonna get a lot of furry in my email now. What have I done? Whatever you were doing to this video, I hope you liked it. I like you, and I hope you like me as much as these special fellows, my God tier patrons on Patreon. Harpy, Benjamin A, Leviticus A, Bim Wafty, James W, Stephanie D, Cameron J, Operator Metro, Chase B, DeAndre M, George W, the Duke of Earl, Shalom L, Arya and Calcifer, Rena J, and Maxman Beta. And an extra special thanks to some people I assume must really like me, or at least have a good chunk of disposable income, my 20 buckaroos. Tentomon, Lando Calzone, Terry T, Sullivan L, Snagowski, Trent S, Blarg, Fuzzy Viper Shark, Al the Pal, Adam K, Harabutica, and Rare Bees. A big thanks again to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video. Go check them out with the link in the description and save some cash. And finally, until next time, I love you guys. Check out one of my other videos that's on screen right now, or head to my channel page if you're looking for something different. I got something for everybody. Okay, dictators, the CIA, prison breaks, Florida men, even a former president who just couldn't stop taking his dick out. It's all good stuff. Great stuff. Just click something or I will die. I get my energy from people clicking on my shit. Okay, I am slowly fading away as we speak. Please hurry. This is not a joke.